Hi, everybody. Welcome to The Jump Seat. This is episode 4. Uh, we'll be speaking with a very special guest today. For those who haven't joined The Jump Seat before, my name's John Martins. I'm hosting or co-hosted here with Dave Durstein, and we're going to be talking to you today about a pretty interesting topic. The Jump Seat is a weekly spotlight bringing you key industry thought leaders, subject matter experts, and next-gen insights affecting you and your department. Hosted by two jump seat firefighters with the occasional look behind the scenes at 200 plus years of tradition, design, and manufacturing of today's products. So, Dave, I'm glad you could join me. Here we are again.
No, man, crazy. 4 weeks into this here, and we keep burning up the internet. So I just want to say thanks to all those who join us every Friday here. We do appreciate it. John and I really have a passion for the industry, both as professionals as well as firefighters. And so we hope we can add a little bit of value to you and your departments, as well as make you guys safer in what you do every day. So. Thanks, John. Glad to be hanging with you again today in the jump seat.
Definitely. Kick us off with a couple happenings in the fire service, Dave.
Yeah. So really, I mean, geez, it's hard not to talk about issues with COVID-19 and things of that nature. I know we keep trying to get away from it, but I've got one big thing that I just want to cover today, John. I'm not going to go into a whole bunch of stuff like we've done in the past. But really, this is an FYI for everybody out there. Currently, there's legislation in DC that's happening this week. It's been off and on. Maybe you've heard about it, maybe you have not. It's called the HERO Bill or HERO Act. And so, it's currently about a $3 trillion bill to help first responders and those people dealing on the front lines with COVID-19. It also includes relief to cities and municipalities. But there's a big piece of that that actually benefits the fire service. And so there's debate right now happening in DC. I've heard numbers upwards of 1.3 billion dollars going into helping additionally support the AFG process. I've heard about a half million in funding, 500 million in funding for the SAFER program. And so really, I just want the fire service to know that there is talks, there is communication going on. I know the I-Chiefs are highly engaged. I know there's several other associations, IFF, National Volunteer Fire Council, that are being consulted and interacting in DC. But really, I just want you all to know that you have a voice as firefighters and emergency responders. And so check it out. You can Google the HERO Act. It's going to be voted on today in the House. The challenge sounds like it might be next week, as it hits the Senate floor. So reach out to your congressman, your members of the House and then the senators as well, and let them know and encourage their support for the funding for our departments and first responders. That's a key piece, and that's one of the ways we get legislation passed. So, John, I think it's important. Just it benefits. You and I as first responders, our departments as well.
Right.
And so I hope it does many of the others that are maybe even suffering because of the added costs associated with this. So that's a lot. I mean, I think it's a relevant thing. I think people need to know about it. They can make a difference by just picking up the phone.
Sure. Thanks, Dave. Yeah, that's good. We'll have to keep a pulse on that stuff, both now and in the future, of course, as we're in quite an interesting time, to say the least. One other thing on the COVID crisis, I just want to touch on quick. We normally, as in the jump seat, we normally don't talk about products just because we are manufactured, but due to what's going on and just the need for sudden needs for disinfecting solutions, I did want to make our fire departments aware. Akron Brass, as well as IDEX Fire and Safety, have put together a pretty rapid, a larger surface disinfectant solution. It's called our FS100. You may see it come out next week on our website, but it's really designed for a quick, effective way to do decon in our stations and in our environments. So check it out next week if your department's in the need or looking for something quickly. We aren't in it to make a lot of money, and I know that you guys probably think we're crazy, but it's truly not designed for that. It's more of there's a need, and we're trying to address it quickly. So we've put something together to take care of that. So check it out on our website next week.
The next piece, John, one of the great things about that one of the great things, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there, but one of the great things about that product, it really was a joint effort, a great team effort, and it shows some of the power of IDEX Fire and Safety, because it was engineers and the staff from Hale, it was engineers and the staff from Akron Brass that jointly worked and put this thing together, tested it, prototyped it, built it out. And really, you're right. The goal is, how do we make, the industry safer and do something good for those folks and really our customers ultimately on an everyday basis. So I think you can find info on it on Akron Brass and on Hale's website. Should be up posted next week. So you kind of heard it here first in some aspects. I know there's some links and social media posts on all our sites as well, but I know we don't like to be salesy. That wasn't intended to be, but we want you guys all to be safe out there as you battle this crazy virus.
Yep. Well, that's great. I would like to transition into the special feature today. We've got somebody on here that I've personally had the privilege to hear speak. And I'll be honest, it wasn't just a speaker. It was somebody who changed the way that my department handled ourselves on scene, helped us think a little different on how we train, and at the end of the day, to create better outcomes. And so before I fully introduce him, I do want to read just a quick bio of Chief Gassaway. So Chief Gassaway, or Dr. Rich Gassaway, he is a retired fire chief as well as founder and principal of situationalawarenessmatters.com. Speaker, author, blogger, podcaster, researcher, author, the list goes on and on. Again, I've got to hear the guy speak, and I couldn't think of a better person to talk about situational awareness, scene safety, and how to reduce some of the mistakes that we make as human beings. So we're going to talk a little bit about our brains today, a little bit about what goes on and why we do what we do, or why we do what we shouldn't do sometimes. Anyways, that being said, the last piece that really ties this together is just our involvement as a company. We have a lot of parallels with Chief Gassaway's message and IDEX Fire and Safety. Our goals are to reduce the complexities on our fire scenes, optimizing our scenes and our crews to make better decisions, just improving our on-scene effectiveness, and at the end of the day, better outcomes, right? So that being said, the title today is Your Brain on Drugs and How Stress Impacts Decision Making. Chief Gassaway, thank you for joining the show. I'm going to go ahead and let you take it from here.
Thanks, Chief. Glad you're here, man.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to be with you and to share this passion topic. John had been a guest on my show. I think we determined 2 or 3 years ago.
Right.
And you reached out to me and said, hey, can you return the favor and come on to our show and share some things related to situational awareness or how our brains operate under stress. I was very, very excited for the chance. So thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
That being said, I guess catch us up to speed. I know we don't have a whole lot of time. We try to make these quick and interesting. And the topic of neuroscience, it's not quick, but it is very interesting. So we'll have to be a little unique today and go quick, but not too quick. But real quick, tell us the story behind situationalawarenessmatters.com and what made you choose this area after your career in the fire service.
Yeah, well, it actually started before my career ended. Okay. I was always a student of near misses and line of duty deaths, and that started very early on in my career. And as my career went on, I started to get frustrated because I would read these line of duty death reports, and I'd say to myself, how could they not see this coming? Oh my goodness, there were so many clues and signs and indicators that this incident they were operating on was going to end in tragedy. But it was like they couldn't see it. It was like they were blind to what was happening in front of them. How could so many smart, talented, experienced people be so blind to the things that were happening right in front of them? And I never could come up with a good answer. In fact, what really disappoints me about myself is I started to become judgmental of those people in charge, and I started saying things like, well, that person was an idiot if they couldn't see that coming. That person must have not had a right training if they couldn't see that coming. And all that judgment made me feel better, but it really wasn't the answer. So I decided that I was going to try to figure out the answer. And to do that, I ended up taking a pretty deep dive into cognitive neuroscience to try to understand What is it about how our brains are functioning under stress that keeps us from being able to see or understand or predict bad outcomes before they occur? And that 5-year journey of education, to say it was mind-blowing for me to learn these things that had never been taught to me any time in my fire service career would be a tremendous understatement. I was stunned at what I didn't know. And I was more stunned at how lucky I had been, but had thought that I was skilled, not lucky. And then as I learned this stuff, I'm like, oh my goodness, I didn't know what I didn't know, which 25 years into your career, which is where I was, is not really how you want to be thinking about your success on the fire ground. You'd like to think it's because of skill and experience, not because of luck. And that's what I realized. And so I put together, I finished my degree and I put together a program on situational awareness and took it out and started sharing with the fire service. And my biggest fear when I did that was all of them would know all this already, and I was the only one that was out of the loop. And how foolish I'm going to look when I get in front of an audience and share these wonderful findings, and they're going to say, like, really, dude, where you been? We've known this for my whole career. But it didn't work that way. I realized as I started sharing this that there were a lot of people out there that didn't know these things about how we behave under stress and how brain function changes and how it influences our thinking and our decisions. And from there, it ended up, I wrote 6 books on the topic and, launched the website and some online courses. And, the main thing that I do when we're not in a pandemic is live training, like what you attended, John, and just sharing that message. And just feels so good to be with an audience. And when I'm done, have those people who've been in the fire service for 30 years come up to me and say, where was this? Where has this been my whole career? I can't believe I didn't know this until now. And I'm like, don't feel bad. That was me too.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how it all came about.
I guess.
So Chief, I'll say, why do we do what we do?
Well, a lot of it has to do with, if I could make a parallel that is kind of a dangerous parallel to compare the brain to a computer, because it really isn't like a computer, but it's the closest thing that we can draw an analogy to. So when you buy a computer, there is some programming already in the computer the day you buy it. Well, when you're born, there's some programming in your brain already when you're born that gives you instinct, fight or flight responses. All of that is genetically engineered and programmed into our DNA, passed down through eons of evolution. You can imagine how short-lived our species would be if we had to learn everything new from every generation. And thankfully, we have the ability to have some of that pre-programmed knowledge plumbed in. So some of it comes from instinct, and then some of it comes from our upbringing, our training, our experiences, our biases, our prejudices. It all influences how we look at things that are happening in our world and how we pass judgment about what's important to know or not important, or I choose to believe this, or I choose not to believe this, and that's where probably some of the biggest arguments come related to religion and politics, is that people have their strong beliefs, and their strong beliefs make them think they're right, and somebody with different beliefs are wrong because I got to be right. Those are my beliefs, and it isn't always that easy. So a lot of it is the programming that we've incurred throughout life, all throughout life, not just our fire service life, but the whole package of experiences stored mostly in our subconscious, mostly outside of our conscious awareness. In fact, we can only consciously recall about 5% of our long-term memory, and about 95% of it's completely outside of awareness. We don't even know the things that we've learned that are stored in there.
Wow.
Just goes to show my wife was right. She said I'm full of useless information.
Yes, and it's even more useless if you can remember the useless information, and then she'll probably accuse you of not being able to remember the important things, but able to easily remember the unimportant things, because she's bringing her bias as to what she thinks is important, and comparing it to what you're actually remembering. It's a vortex of risk for us.
So as far as getting in more in the fireman side of us here, so the question I have for you, the human behind the helmet, what are some of the innate limitations we have as people, as humans, as firefighters that we probably don't know of? Because like you said, you don't know what you don't know. So what are those, Chief?
So I'll ask, I'm going to throw back to you a question. All right. So the question is, as firefighters, have you heard of the term span of control?
Sure, of course.
Yeah.
And how big should span of control be for, for like, say, an incident manager or somebody who's, what's the number?
No more than 5 to 1 from what I recall.
Yeah, five to seven on the high end. Mm-hmm. So where did that number come from? Did somebody roll the dice, and when the dice landed on 5, they said, well, I guess it should be 5? No, that number came from research. In the 1950s, a Harvard professor named Miller was commissioned to do a study to figure out how big is the average person's short-term memory capacity. And he came up with 5 to 7 pieces of unrelated information as the capacity of short-term memory. That in turn is what gave rise to the creation of a 7-digit phone number system. And then we have subsequently added the area code onto it. And that is the basis of span of control. So you think about how does this transcend to us on a fire ground? You get on the scene of a fire, and you may have dozens, if not hundreds of pieces of information coming at you. The problem is we can't process and hold and remember dozens or hundreds of pieces of information. Short-term memory capacity can very easily get overloaded and overwhelmed. And when it does, it on its own starts to shed or release or throw into the trash pieces of information because it can't hold anymore. And the problem for us is what it chooses to put into the recycle bin, we don't have conscious control over it. Our brain makes those decisions at a level outside of our control, and it uses an algorithm that's mostly revolving around survival. So what it perceives to be the most important for survival, which whether it's accurate or not, it could be another thing, it's going to hold on to, or what we have emotional connection to, it will hold on to, and other stuff that might be very important, it will shed. So here's a really good best practice takeaway tip for your listeners and viewers. When you're coming on to just say a scene of a house fire, instead of trying to process 10, 15, 20 pieces of information, focus on a small number of the most important pieces of information. You say, well, how many? Well, span of control is 5 to 7, right? So 5 to 7. No, unfortunately, that's not the answer, because they have since done research and put people under stress. And when you put people under stress, that short-term memory capacity becomes 3 to 5 pieces of unrelated information. And they've done robust research studies of putting people under stress and seeing what they can recall off a list. So this is not made up pseudoscience. Your listeners and viewers can go out there and find this research for themselves. So focus on the 3 to 5 most critical pieces of information essential to making good decisions. And when you think about it, truly, when you boil it down, in most cases, there probably aren't more than 5 critical pieces of data essential to drive a good decision. Now, the benefit is you can think in advance what those 3 to 5 pieces of information are. You don't have to wait till you get on a scene to figure it out. You can figure it out months in advance. Same for medical calls, same for hazmat, same for any type of call. What are the most critical things that I need to know to make a good decision? And those good decisions revolve around meeting the mission, saving lives and property, and saving ourselves. And that's what it should drive the good decisions. And it's really a small list. And anybody who tries to process more than that can easily become overloaded and overwhelmed. And they can actually get to the point where they can make no decision at all. They can experience something called analysis paralysis. They get so overwhelmed by the volume of information that in their mind, they can't fit it all together to make sense. And they get frozen up till they can't decide. They can't make a decision.
So you go from 5 to 7 on a nice sunny day out on the training pad, and you get that call, and you basically can half that, essentially.
Yeah.
And that's to do it right.
Right. If you're under stress.
Under stress, exactly.
Now there are some tips and hacks for how to improve this, and that would be to train in a way that creates stress, so that you're doing something that the term would be stress inoculation. The more you work in a stressed environment, the better you'll be working in a stressed environment, because you're accustomed to working and making decisions in the stressed environment. So make your trainings as realistic as possible to try to equal, within an element of safety, but to equal the stress level, and then practice what are the most critical pieces of information I need to know. And as you're practicing that and learning it under stress, it will be easier to recall under stress. That's called context-dependent learning. Learn in the same environment that you will perform in. And that includes like firefighting. You want to train and learn on a drill ground with smoke and fire present. That's different than classroom. So if you were to learn the same lesson, the two identical fireground lessons, one learned in a classroom and one learned with turnout gear on and smoke and fire present, and the stress of that situation present, the lessons learned in that contextual rich environment will stick with you better than the same lessons learned in a classroom.
So that hands-on application really does have an impact and a benefit in your decision making when you get out on the training ground and put it into live usage.
Yes. Now I want to issue a word of caution here. Sometimes what happens, there's a disconnect in training because, and I, as an instructor, I'm going to say that I'm guilty of this. Before I knew what I know now about how the brain functions, I would teach one thing in a classroom and say, okay, here's all the basic cognitive things you need to know about, fire behavior and da-da-da-da-da. And then we go out on the drill ground and I would focus just on the hands-on stuff. Here's how you pull the line. Here's how you stretch it. I would be focusing on building kinesthetic skills, muscle memory skills. And where I had this disconnect is I forgot, and I'll call the whistle on myself, I forgot to bring the cognitive lessons of the classroom onto the drill ground and reinforce the cognitive things that we learned in the classroom while we're in the context enriched environment. So when you get out onto the drill ground, you got to bring some of those things that you were teaching in the classroom and sprinkle them in, like seasoning on your meat and potatoes when you're doing the hands-on stuff. You can't keep them separated. You have to integrate the cognitive learning with the kinesthetic or muscle memory development learning and put them both together. And then you end up with somebody who's a critical thinker and a resilient problem solver.
And that's where you see burn barrels, right? That's why they do that, right? Because that in your brain stimulates. I'll let you be the expert here, but the olfactory, right? The smell. Train with that so that it's not new when you're on the scene. Is that right, Chief?
That's right. So if you want to stimulate as many of the senses as you can, and if possible, stimulate all of the senses. so that what you're creating is an environment that they'll be seeing what they would see, hearing what they would hear, smelling what they would smell, get it? I played a little thing on words there. I didn't even realize I did that. But
ninja, he's a ninja.
Don't worry, folks, he's around all day.
Yeah. So that's called multisensory stimulation. So the more senses you stimulate, the more the lessons stick.
Very so I mean, I got an interesting play on this, right? So, you know, I can remember I used to be that young cowboy jumping in the back of the truck, grabbing my spot in the jump seat, ready to go to fight fires, right? I knew it all when I was, you know, 18 years old and my first fire. And then I look at, you know, now I'm considered they actually call me like the old guy almost at the station. I don't consider myself old, but a little wiser maybe. I'm definitely not the cavalier cowboy I was. But you kind of look at like just John and me. There's a generational gap. You know, how is it? Does it make a difference generationally as well? Do you find a difference in age or in generation type as well?
Well, let's first speak to age. You know, with age, with time on the department, let's set physical age aside, with time on the department, the more time you have, hopefully, the more experience you have, the more you have stored memory. Remember that I told you about 95% of that's outside of conscious awareness, but that doesn't mean you can't access it and use it. So experience builds wisdom. It builds a more robust database of information that can drive your intuitive thinking and decision making that a new person just won't have. I mean, the new person will think they have it, and as much as you said it, Dave, I was the same way. You know, I was 18. I had my firemanship 1 card. Get out of the way. You know, I'm gonna save everything and everyone because I graduated, so I know everything I need to know. And it's funny, the older we get, the less we realize we know. But you know, I think there's a risk that when we're young, we don't know what we don't know. Absolutely. And I call it ignorance, and I don't mean ignorance in a derogatory term. Ignorance in the term of they just don't know what they don't know yet. And we all started there, and over the course of time built a database of knowledge and wisdom. Now, for the experienced person, age not dependent, but you know, years of experience, there's another risk here for the experienced person. An experienced person can become desensitized to risk. They work in an environment that is risky for so long without consequence that they lose their respect for how dangerous the environment is. You know, they start to become complacent and their vigilance lowers because, oh, geez, I've been on this call. I've been on this exact same call 100 times, you know, just another routine, this or that. And where in fact, you know, that every call holds the ability to be unique in its own way. But when we pigeonhole that type of call into a routine, and we let our guard down and we lose our sensitivity for the risk of that environment, it becomes very dangerous. So experience is good, but experience can also bite us.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, thanks for sharing some of that. A couple other things as far as, and I know, again, we could talk about this for weeks, right? You do this all the time. We could talk for weeks about this, but what can we do about it in this way? Meaning, we talked a little bit about our limitations as humans, some of the things that we need to be aware of if we don't train the way we should. Aside from that, what can we do about it to just overcome some of our natural limitations? Is there anything outside of what we've talked about?
Yeah, well, there are so many things, John, that I wouldn't do the topic justice with only offering 2 or 3. And I've given you a couple of, you know, things to kind of stimulate the thinking. But what I'm going to suggest is if somebody truly does want to learn about their abilities and their limitations cognitively, to visit my website. And this is not a plug to buy anything. It's all there for free. There's 400 some articles, 320 some podcast episodes that are all free. So if somebody will just invest some time, then they can learn a lot about themselves. Oh goodness. And there's a lot to learn. You know, if you ever watch that TV show Brain Games and you see some of the stuff they do that tricks us, and you say, oh my God, how did I get tricked by this? And here's the thing, I know what they're going to do, and it still tricks me too. You know, simply because I can explain it doesn't mean my brain is any better wired to keep some of these things from happening to me. Like auditory exclusion, for example, you're going deaf because you're so hyper focused on one thing, you're not hearing the other things that are happening around you. You've heard of tunnel vision, you're having tunneled hearing and not paying attention to other stimulus around you. Well, you know, if I'm watching a really good sporting event on TV and my wife decides she wants to have a conversation with me about some important life need, I'm not always paying attention to what she's saying. I might be giving her some affirmation. Yes, dear. Yes, dear. Yes, dear. And then a week later, she wants to bring that conversation up again. And I'm like, oh man, I am screwed because I wasn't paying attention at all to what she was saying. Then I got to kind of like fake it and act like I know what she was saying, or make her angry by saying, well, honey, I really wasn't listening. She's like, well, you're acknowledging, acknowledging the traffic, Rich. Yes, I did. And we can this can happen on a fireground. We can acknowledge the traffic, but not understand the meaning of what was actually said to us, even though we acknowledged it. So some of these things that we know can happen to us on fire scenes or in other aspects of life, I can explain how and why they happen, but it doesn't necessarily mean I can prevent them from happening to me. But you know, on the website, there are lots of ideas, best practices, tips, hacks, and things that people can benefit from. And there are so many.
I'll chime in real quick. The podcasts are phenomenal, where you're doing interviews with these real same people that are here to tell a story. And I know for my role, I do a lot of driving typically. There's nothing better than to hear this same stuff out of someone's voice who's lived it, felt it, breathed it, and now understands it cognitively. Excuse me, with what you're saying. So it's great content out there.
Yeah, for those who aren't familiar with the podcast, I launched it to give a voice to people who've had near-miss events, and now they've got a story to tell and lessons learned to share. So just yesterday, I recorded episode like 327, and not the you know, dig into my show while I'm on your show, but the person was an EMS person that got exposed to a chemical called methyl bromide, and on an EMS call, and 2 people died as a result of it. And when she went to the hospital, they said, well, depending on how much you inhaled in the neck, it could get into your fat cells and lay dormant for 2 weeks. So anytime in the next 2 weeks, you could start having convulsive seizures and die, and there's nothing we'll be able to do to stop it. So get your life in order. That was the podcast.
Wow. Well, so let me ask really quick 2 questions, because you mentioned your website, but I don't think you actually told us what your website is. And I know because John and I have shared it, but maybe you tell our listeners and our followers here, where do I find it? What is the website?
Yeah. So my mission is called Situational Awareness Matters. And the website's location is SA for situational awareness, samatters.com. So then the podcast is SA Matters Radio. The YouTube channel is SA Matters TV, and everything is, you know, just branded around. You know, if somebody just went to samatters.com, everything, they can access everything from there. The podcast, the YouTube links, everything is there for them, and it's free.
And it's free. It's free. Well, Chief, I tell you what, on behalf of John and myself and all of us at IDEX Fire Safety, we're glad you were able to be here today. And, you know, I would encourage anybody who wants to know more about it, reach out to Chief Gassaway. Go check out his website. We're actually going to post that in our links here at the end as well. And so really on behalf of us, we're glad you're able to join us in the jump seat here today. I know you're retired, but it's probably great to be back in a jump seat for a little bit. And we appreciate, wish you well. And hey, maybe we'll have you back again as we continue to dive into more and more this year in the near future.
Can I say just one thing about the jump seat?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm in Madison, Wisconsin. I live in Minnesota, but I'm in Madison, Wisconsin right now at my son's house. My son is a career firefighter for Madison Fire Department, and he'd been on about 2 years, and he said, "Dad, do you want to come and do a ride along?" And I'm like, "Oh my God, more than life itself, you know." But I'd give the ride along in the jump seat again. So we went, and I wasn't going to engage in any activities. I was just riding along. I didn't even have turnout gear, but we mounted up to go on a call, and we were on the engine, and I got into the back, into the seat facing forward, and he was sitting in front of me in the seat facing me. And I looked at him, and there I was, 30 years younger. It was me, going on a call with a big smile on my face, with the window down and my arm hanging out the window. And it was like I was looking in the mirror of 30 years ago. And it was the most amazing feeling. I didn't know that was going to happen, but oh my goodness, that feeling flooded back of me new, full of enthusiasm and hope and, everything that comes with it. It was, yeah. Thanks for letting me share that.
Absolutely. No, that's a great one. And, I mean, being in a family of firefighters myself, I've been on calls with my dad, with my brother, there's something to be said about that as well. And I guess I haven't had the opportunity, to be with the father-son kind of interaction of me being the father in that case. I'm usually like I said, I was that crazy cowboy when I was a few years younger. Yeah. Probably had that same smile on my face and was ready to go jump out of the truck and at the call. So I can totally relate and appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah, thank you for that.
So, Chief, again, thank you very much. I'm glad you're able to be on here. Hey, guys, everybody who's following along, we're glad you're able to join us today. Next week, we're actually taking a little trip to Michigan. So we're going to go up to Spencer Manufacturing. They are another manufacturer of fire apparatus. We're gonna be with Grant Spencer, and he's going to give us a walkthrough of where they build their trucks, how they build their trucks, and give us a look inside their operation in Michigan. So please join us. Get a chance to take a look inside of one of these smaller apparatus builders. They build a nice quality truck up there in Michigan, and we'll be doing that 3 o'clock next Friday. That's the 22nd of May, and we look forward to seeing you all here. We appreciate you tuning in. Maybe you missed some of our previous episodes. Hey, don't worry. You can still go catch them, right? So they're on Facebook. You can search back through the IDEX Fire and Safety. They're on the Hale Products page as well as the Akron Brass social media sites. They're on YouTube. You can also find them on blog.idexfiresafety and also on our JumpSeat page. It's idexfiresafety.com/the-jumpseat. And you can find out more about us and our story on that website as well.
Last but not least, leave us some comments if you guys think of others you want to see in the future. Now's your chance. Let us know. We're excited to keep this going and bringing in some of the best in the industry. So without further ado, have a great Friday. Be safe, and we'll see you next Friday. Thank you very much.